This is Mr. Wesley, and today we are talking about a number. Not an abstract number, not a statistical average that belongs to other men in other situations, a number that is specific to you, that is being calculated right now by forces you may not have fully mapped, and that will determine the shape of the final chapter of your financial life, with a precision and a permanence that most men over 60 do not understand until they are already standing inside the consequences of it. The number is this. On average, men who divorce after 60 experience a drop in their net worth of between 40 and 45% within the first 5 years following the divorce. Not income, net worth. The accumulated result of everything you built across the decades of your working life. The retirement accounts, the home equity, the investments, the savings that were supposed to carry you through the years when you could no longer wanted to work. Reduced by nearly half in the years immediately following the end of your marriage. And that number, which researchers who study gray divorce have been documenting with increasing precision over the last decade, is the average. For men in specific financial situations, men with significant pension exposure, men in states with particular property division frameworks, men who built the majority of their marital wealth in real estate or in a business that cannot be easily liquidated without significant loss, that number can be considerably worse. You may have known, in a general way, that divorce is financially expensive. Most men do. What most men do not know, because nobody has shown them the specific anatomy of the wealth drop with the precision it deserves, is exactly how it happens, which assets are most vulnerable, which decisions made during the marriage and during the divorce process itself most dramatically affect the outcome, and what the window looks like, if a window exists, for meaningful mitigation. That is what today is for. In a few minutes, I am going to walk you through the specific mechanisms by which the wealth drop happens. Not as a general warning, but as a precise map of the financial territory you are either already navigating or are likely to navigate in the years ahead. I am going to give you a framework for understanding which of your assets are most at risk, which decisions have the largest leverage on the outcome, and what the men who come through this financial transition with the most intact position do differently from the men who lose the most. There is one specific decision point in particular, one that most men either do not know exists or underestimate dramatically, that I want to make sure you have clearly before this video ends. But first, you need to understand why the wealth drop is as large as it is for men in this demographic specifically. Because the reasons are not obvious and understanding them is the only way to navigate them effectively. I am Mr. Wesley. I have spent years working alongside men who arrived at the financial reality of gray divorce without a map. Men who had been careful and disciplined and responsible across decades of building, and who found that the financial architecture of their marriages exposed them to losses they had not calculated, because nobody had shown them the specific vulnerabilities before the vulnerabilities were activated. This is Relational Insights. And this is the financial clarity that most men in this demographic do not receive until it is significantly more expensive to receive it. Let me give you the map. The first thing you need to understand about the gray divorce wealth drop is why it is larger for men over 60 than for men who divorce earlier in life. The mechanism is not primarily legal, though the legal framework matters enormously, and I will address it. The primary mechanism is structural. It is a function of where men over 60 typically hold their wealth and how those specific asset classes interact with the legal and practical realities of late-life divorce in ways that are systematically disadvantageous to the husband in most financial configurations. Men over 60 have typically spent the preceding 3 to 4 decades building wealth in the asset classes that are most efficient for long-term wealth accumulation and most vulnerable to division in a divorce. Defined benefit pensions, retirement accounts, home equity, business interests. These are not liquid assets. They are not assets that can be divided without cost, without tax consequence, and without structural disruption to the income stream they were designed to generate, and they are almost universally treated as marital assets subject to equitable distribution, regardless of which partner primarily generated them, regardless of the employment and sacrifice history that produced them, and regardless of the financial impact that their division has on the specific income architecture that the man who built them was depending on for his retirement security. The pension is the most significant example of this structural vulnerability and the one that produces the largest single-item wealth drop for men in this demographic, a defined benefit pension, the kind that a man who spent 30 or 35 years in a specific career typically has access to, is a stream of income that is designed to support one household in retirement. When it is divided by a qualified domestic relations order, which is the legal instrument that splits pension benefits between divorcing spouses, the income stream it was designed to generate is split permanently. The man who built the pension across decades of work receives a portion of what he planned to retire on. His former wife receives a portion that is entirely independent of her own employment history and that continues for the remainder of her life. The pension that was designed to fund one retirement now funds two, and the man who built it retires on significantly less than he planned, with no mechanism for recovery because the income stream is fixed, and the portion that went to his former wife is gone permanently. This is not an argument about whether the legal framework is just. It is a description of how the framework operates and what it produces for men over 60 in specific financial situations. Understanding it is not the same as accepting it without navigation. There is navigation available, but the navigation requires understanding the terrain before you are standing in the middle of it without a map. Picture this. There is a man I know, I will call him Howard, who retired at 63 after 31 years as a civil engineer for a municipal government. Howard had a defined benefit pension that was designed to pay him approximately 68% of his final salary for the remainder of his life. He had planned his retirement around that income stream with care and precision. He had done the calculations. He knew what his monthly income would be. He knew what his expenses would be. He knew what he could afford and what he could not, and he had built a retirement plan that worked cleanly within those parameters. Howard's marriage ended at 64. He had been aware that things had not been right between him and his wife for a number of years. I could describe the pattern of his marriage in the terms I have used in earlier videos, and you would recognize it immediately. He had not anticipated the divorce when it came. He had not prepared for it financially because he had not seen it coming with the specificity that preparation requires. When the divorce settlement was finalized, a qualified domestic relations order split his pension 50%. Howard retired at 65 on 34% of his final salary instead of 68. The retirement he had planned with care and precision across 3 decades of work was structurally halved by a legal instrument he had known existed only in the abstract until it applied to his specific situation. Howard told me that the number, when he finally saw it in the settlement document, felt like a different kind of loss than the loss of the marriage. The loss of the marriage was painful in the way that the end of a long relationship is painful, complicated, layered, carrying grief alongside relief and clarity alongside confusion. The loss of the pension income was a different quality of pain entirely. It was the specific pain of watching something you built with decades of your life cut in half by a process you did not fully understand until it was too late to navigate it differently. Howard's situation is not unusual. It is the representative situation of the gray divorce wealth drop for men in this demographic. And the question I want to address for the rest of this video is not whether the situation is just, but what can be done before, during, and in the immediate aftermath of a late marriage ending to navigate it with the maximum possible preservation of the financial position you built. The second mechanism of the wealth drop is home equity division and its interaction with the post-divorce housing market for men over 60. Home equity is typically the second largest asset in a long marriage after pension and retirement accounts, and its division produces a specific set of challenges for men in this demographic that are distinct from the challenges faced by younger divorcing couples. The family home in a long marriage is almost universally a marital asset subject to equal or equitable division. In practice, this means one of two outcomes: the home is sold and the proceeds divided, or one partner buys out the other's equity interest and retains the home. For men over 60, both of these outcomes carry financial consequences that are significantly more difficult to absorb than they would be for a man divorcing at 40. If the home is sold and the proceeds divided, the man over 60 enters the post-divorce housing market as a single buyer, with approximately half the equity he had as part of a couple, in a market that has in most regions appreciated significantly since the original home was purchased, at a life stage where taking on significant new mortgage debt is both more financially risky and more psychologically difficult than it would have been 20 years earlier. The housing outcome for men over 60 following a divorce that involves the sale of the family home is frequently a significant downgrade in housing quality, housing security, or both. Not as a temporary adjustment, but as a permanent feature of the financial landscape of their retirement years. If one partner retains the home by buying out the other's equity, the financial dynamics are equally challenging but differently configured. In most cases, the partner who retains the home is the wife. This is not universal, but it is the predominant outcome for a straightforward reason. In most long marriages, the wife has been the primary domestic manager of the family home and has a stronger practical and emotional attachment to it as a specific asset. The husband who is bought out receives a cash settlement equal to his equity share, which sounds financially equitable in isolation, but loses access to the appreciating asset that the home represents in markets where real estate continues to appreciate, receives the settlement in a form that is taxable and subject to the market conditions at the time of the settlement, and enters the rental or purchase market as a single buyer with the specific financial disadvantages I described above. The third mechanism is what I call the retirement account tax trap, and it is the one that costs men the most because it is the least understood and the most easily avoided with the right information at the right time. Retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks, defined contribution plans of various kinds, are marital assets subject to division in virtually every jurisdiction. Their division, like pension division, is governed by a qualified domestic relations order, and the specific financial hazard of retirement account division, unlike pension division, which reduces an income stream, is the tax consequence of the division itself. When a retirement account is divided in a divorce, the division can be structured in ways that trigger immediate tax liability, or in ways that defer that liability. The man who does not understand this distinction, who accepts a settlement structure that was not optimized for tax efficiency because he did not have the specific expertise to identify the optimization opportunity, can find himself facing a tax bill in the year of the divorce settlement that compounds the financial loss of the division itself. I have seen this happen repeatedly. A man accepts what appears to be an equitable division of retirement assets, 50% to each party, without fully understanding that the specific structure of the division has triggered a taxable event that reduces the effective value of his portion by a further 15 or 20% after tax. The apparent equity of the 50-50 split conceals a post-tax inequality that the man only discovers when his accountant shows him the bill. The mitigation for this specific hazard is the involvement of a financial specialist, specifically a certified divorce financial analyst, in the settlement negotiation before the settlement is finalized. This is the specific decision point I promised you at the beginning of this video. The certified divorce financial analyst is a specialist whose specific expertise is the financial modeling of divorce settlement outcomes, who can show you, with the precision of actual numbers, rather than percentages and estimates, what the after-tax, after-cost value of each settlement option actually is, rather than what its face value appears to be. The man who has this expertise on his side of the settlement table is in a categorically different position than the man whose representation is limited to an attorney who understands the law but does not specialize in the financial modeling of the outcomes the law produces. The cost of engaging a certified divorce financial analyst is real. It is not negligible. And for men who are already financially stressed by the prospect of the divorce itself, it can feel like an additional burden at the worst possible moment. What I want you to understand clearly is the alternative. The alternative is making permanent financial decisions about assets you built across decades of work without the specific financial expertise to evaluate the real value of what you are agreeing to. The alternative is discovering, months or years after the settlement is finalized, that the apparent equity of the agreement concealed a post-tax inequality that permanently reduced your retirement security in ways that cannot be corrected after the fact. The cost of the specialist, measured against the cost of the alternative, is almost always the more financially rational choice. And making financially rational choices at this stage of your life, with the financial stakes this high and the recovery window this compressed, is the most important thing you can do with the information this video is giving you. I want to stay with you here for a moment, because I am aware that what I have been describing in this video has a particular weight for men who are currently inside a marriage that they are not certain will survive, or who are already in the process of a divorce, or who have been through the process and are living with the financial aftermath of it. These are not abstract situations. They are the specific and daily reality of a significant number of the men watching this video. And the weight of that reality deserves to be acknowledged before I give you the final framework. There is a specific kind of financial grief that belongs to the man who built carefully across decades, and who is now watching the structure of what he built being reconfigured by a process he did not choose and cannot fully control. It is different from the relational grief of a marriage ending. It is more concrete and in some ways more relentless because it does not ebb and flow the way emotional grief does. It is simply present in the numbers every month, in the retirement calculations that no longer add up the way they were supposed to, in the specific daily reality of a financial life that was planned for one set of circumstances and is now operating in a fundamentally different one. That grief is real. It is not weakness. It is the appropriate response of a man who built something carefully and who is watching the careful building be subject to forces he was not shown or operating, and honoring that grief, sitting with it honestly, rather than rushing past it toward the pragmatic response, is part of what allows the pragmatic response to actually work when it is applied. A man who has not processed the weight of his financial situation clearly cannot make the clearest possible financial decisions about it. The emotional clarity and the financial clarity are not separate projects. They are the same project. Here is the final framework I want to leave you with. These are the 4 decisions that have the largest leverage on the gray divorce wealth drop outcome. The 4 points at which the difference between the best possible outcome And the worst possible outcome is most dramatically affected by the quality of the decision made. The first is the timing of legal engagement. The man who engages a family law attorney with specific gray divorce expertise before the divorce process formally begins, ideally before any conversations about settlement have begun between the parties, is in a significantly stronger position than the man who engages legal representation after the process has already framed the terms of the negotiation. Early engagement is not about escalation. It is about understanding the terrain before you are navigating it under pressure. The second is the financial specialist decision I described above. Certified divorce financial analyst engaged before settlement negotiation. Not during, before. The modeling needs to happen before the numbers are on the table, so that your response to those numbers is informed by their real value rather than their apparent value. The third is the pension valuation question. Pensions are complex assets, and their valuation in a divorce context is a specialist skill. The present value of a defined benefit pension is a function of multiple variables: the specific benefit formula, the projected retirement date, the actuarial life expectancy calculations, the applicable interest rates, that produce a number that is almost never obvious from the pension statement itself. The man who accepts a pension valuation that was not produced by a qualified actuary or pension specialist is almost certainly accepting a valuation that does not accurately represent what the asset is actually worth. And the man who accepts an inaccurate valuation in a divorce settlement has no recourse after the fact. The fourth is the post-settlement financial restructuring decision. Most men who come through a gray divorce emerge with a financial structure that was designed for a different life than the one they are now living. The retirement plan that was built for 2 people in one household, with one set of expenses and 2 income streams, needs to be rebuilt from the ground up for one person in a different housing situation, with a different income profile and a different expense structure. The men who do this restructuring immediately, who engage a financial advisor with specific post-divorce expertise in the first months following the settlement, consistently report better financial outcomes at 5 and 10 years post-divorce than the men who delay the restructuring, because the emotional weight of the transition makes the financial planning feel overwhelming. The restructuring is not pleasant. It requires sitting with numbers that reflect a loss you are still processing, but it is the work that determines what the financial trajectory of your remaining years actually looks like, and the earlier it begins, the more options it has available to it. The wealth drop is real. The number is large. And for men over 60, the recovery window is compressed in ways that make every decision in the process more consequential than it would be for a man with 30 working years still ahead of him. But consequential is not the same as unnavigable. The men who navigate this best are not the men with the most money or the most powerful attorneys. They are the men with the most accurate information at the most critical decision points. And that accuracy, the accuracy that comes from understanding the specific mechanisms of the wealth drop, the specific vulnerabilities of your specific asset profile, and the specific decision points where the outcome is most significantly shaped, is what this video was designed to give you. A man who knows the number before it arrives can prepare for it. A man who sees it for the first time in a settlement document has already paid the full price of not knowing. Drop a comment. Men, what aspect of the financial reality of gray divorce do you feel least prepared for right now, and what is the information you wish you had access to before the process began? Subscribe to Relational Insights. Every week, Mr. Wesley breaks down the hidden financial and relational realities of late marriage failure and gray divorce, with the precision and the honesty that finally gives men over 60 the map they need before they need it.